Kate Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. Let me fix this a little bit. Okay. I'm going to light the candles. You should be able to see the candles. So it's time for our Saturday book. And before I even introduce the book, I just want to make a couple of points. Let me organize my brain here. It's going to take a while now. So my first point is I am not any kind of expert on this topic. This is information that I've accumulated. I've been reading about it off and on for a while. We'll get to why. And I don't want you to think that what I talk about here today is any kind of received wisdom or anything like that. This is just a topic that I've been drawn to that I'd like to share. I think it's very important. Second of all, there are modern versions, some of them better than others. We're going to talk about that. And because of, various reasons involved in this that will become apparent, this is not just one book. So I've used two complete books. The Kybalion by the Three Initiates. This is an anonymous source put together by apparently three initiates, which we'll explain in a minute. Also, by Manhardeep Singh, The 12 Laws of the Universe, which is coming to the same basic philosophy from another culture, another religious belief, but it's the same, as you will find out. And then towards the end of this series of videos, I have collated a number of sources off the internet, sites that discuss these things and some sites that apply them in more modern terms. But you have to be very careful. I'm sure you've heard Denise and me talk about this stuff. She's far more knowledgeable about it than I am, which is really helpful. And the warning is, if you don't have a full understanding of it, it's easy to misapply the philosophy. So we're going to attempt to get an introductory understanding of this philosophy. And I'm no doubt that many people watching already know all this, and this is rudimentary. We're talking kindergarten here. But let's just say that this is where I work out my things and share as I progress, and hopefully. And so let's just move forward. So the Kybalion by the Three Initiates, the 12 Laws of the Universe by Singh, and then a variety of other sources. And before we start with the Kybalion, I have a kind of historical background here. So the belief is, my glasses are dirty. The belief is that we stumble onto knowledge when we're ready to hear it. And I think this is a significant and accurate truth. There are things that I've toyed with, put off, ignored, that keep throwing themselves at my feet, asking to be pursued. This is one of them. This whole belief system is one of them. And it felt like it was the right time. And the more I took notes on these books, the more I realized this is the perfect time. Because I think that this will tie together, for example, our book of heaven, A New Science of Heaven. The physics, if we look at the continuum, the physics and the metaphysics meet at the laws of the universe. So let's go forward. When you're ready, the knowledge is available to you. So the laws of the universe, what are they? Well, laws, regulations, they're intrinsic. They run things. They're part of the system. They're unchanging. They were known to all ancient cultures, although there may be slight variations, as you're going to see. We're going to talk about the variations a little bit. I think that's important too. They're attributed to the Hermetic Philosophy of ancient Egypt as the original source. So here's a little history. Hermeticism is a philosophical system from Egypt, and it's actually debated if it really came from India, which is, it was named by the Greeks in Egypt. Remember, the Greeks were ruling for several, rulers. Cleopatra was Greek, the Ptolemies. And around the 1st century, this became a really active philosophy, but it's much older than the 1st century. And it's named after Hermes Trismegistus. And I'm sure, I mispronounced it. If I did the whole real Latin thing, it would sound a little different. But this is translated into Hermes, the thrice great. So the 3 times great God. Interesting number, 3. In Latin, it means, it is used as Mercurius Termassimus. Mercurius Termassimus. Same thing. Hermes and Mercury were the equivalents, the synchronistic relationship between these two gods. They covered the same bases, basically. Greek, Hermes, Roman, Mercury. The writings, and there's a number of writings that elucidate these beliefs, are called together in an amalgam the Hermetica. One is called the Emerald Tablet, and this is from early Arabic alchemy. So here now already we're talking about yet another culture that shares the roots of these beliefs. Also includes the Corpus Hermeticum, the body of Hermes' work, and this is strongly influenced by the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Arabians, and India. Hermes was worshipped as the god of wisdom and was considered a half god, half man. So what he was, as I said, was a syncretic combination of Hermes, the Greek god, and Thoth, the Egyptian god. He was the great master of the universe. He lived for 1,000 years because, remember, he was partially mortal. He was also found in Islamic works from the Emerald, the Emerald Tablets. He was associated with the prophet Idris. He was also associated with the Baha'i. Both of these gods were Thoth, Hermes, were worshipped in the temple of Thoth, in Kemenu, as the Egyptians called it, or Hermopolis, as the Greeks called it. So you have a joining together of a number of different cultures and philosophical beliefs. Hermes was the god of interpretive communication, received wisdom. Thoth was the god of wisdom. So there's an association with other ancient deities, and he's mentioned often in the ancient writing Linear B and in a number of places in the Greek, Islamic, and Egyptian cultures. He was mentioned by Cicero as Hermes, son of the Nile. The Egyptian Hermetic literature was influenced by Greco-Babylonian astrology. Remember that Arabic astrology was very important here. And the Arabic culture was a little closer to Babylon than Greek, but not that far off. Alchemy, which we'll talk about, and it offered a means of personal ascension from the spiritual constraints of the physical being. Now, where have we heard that before? Hermeticism was developed at the same time as Gnosticism, which we've talked a little bit about. Hermes Trismegistus was regarded by the early Christian philosophers as a wise pagan prophet who actually foresaw Christianity. And they were happy to, and therefore legitimize him to some extent. The Gnostics, the earlier Christians, believed in what was called the Prisca Theologica, which is the ancient theology, which is Hermetic philosophy. They believed it was the true theology from God to man, and it runs through all religions and is passed on by true prophets. I've often said, if you took all the religions of the world and did a Venn diagram, you'd find that kernel of intersection. This may be it. So these different theologies include, besides Baha'i, besides Islam, ancient Arabian astrology, Babylonian belief, early Greek belief, Egyptian belief, and Indian belief, it also includes Zoroaster. Zoroaster, I believe, is Iran, if I'm not mistaken. And it also includes Plato. Hermes was said to be a contemporary of Moses, but also a real life person who was alive in the 1st century, but he was supposed to have lived 1,000 years. We're talking very ancient belief. You have to just sort of receive the information and not try too hard to fit this into an exact historical timeline. This is bigger than that. So I thought this was I love word origins, phrase origins, and you've heard of things being hermetically sealed. Well, hermetically from Hermes. Hermetically sealing something was in alchemy. It was an alchemical procedure to make the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone was how you would turn base metal into gold. Or was it really? They'd mix stuff in a glass vessel and they'd seal it by fusing the glass neck shut with what was called the seal of Hermes. And then they'd heat it for 30 or 40 days. And that was supposed to provide the changeover from base metal to gold, the hermetically sealed vial with the seal of Hermes. However, it's pretty much accepted in philosophical circles that the philosopher's stone is a metaphor for enlightenment. Okay, so the Kybalion. I hope I'm saying that right, the Kybalion. It sounds very Greek. By the 3 initiates, who are anonymous authors. This is a study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and the Greeks, and it's dedicated to Hermes Trismegistus, and I'm probably going to repeat myself here because I'm collating a bunch of different sources. In the introduction to the book, they talk about, this is written for the students of secret doctrines of the world's old Hermetic teachings. It's arcane, it's occulted, and this does not mean scary, demonic, evil. Latin occulted means hidden. And this information was hidden intentionally, which we'll get to. This is the master key. It's collating the information that was handed down for many centuries and hidden, occulted. All coming from Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, the contemporary of Abraham. Well, we heard he was the same as at the same time as Moses. He was a venerable sage. Those who don't believe he was entirely a god, he was a venerable sage. He's called the great central sun. Sun in the sky, not son from the father, sun in the sky. But I think that's an interesting wordplay. The great central sun of occultism, of hidden information. All occult hidden teachings of every culture of all times, all of them globally, can be traced back to this philosophy. You can trace a path from India to Egypt, as I said, Babylon, the Arabs, to Egypt. And in Egypt, Hermes, when we're not talking just about the god, Hermes reconciled the divergent views. And despite differences on the surface, there's a basic resemblance and correspondence that underlies the numerous seemingly disparate occult theories of different lands. I think that's so important. And this book is written in an interesting style. It's a little bit, little arch, a little overly hoity-toity, but there's a reason for that. They want you to take this very seriously, which I do. I think this is really, really interesting. Hermetic teachings are what's called the Great Reconciler because they bring together all these different religions and give them an intersecting focal point. Hermes planted the seed of truth and did not establish one school of philosophy to dominate thought. Instead, he preserved the seed of truth with the work of a few Hermetic masters, this work was passed down quietly, often occulted. He kept alive the perpetual light of wisdom. And there's a lot of maxims, sayings, axioms, in this book and in Hermetic philosophy, basically, like as above, so below. But one of them is, let not the flame die out. Continue to pass this on. And the few people that familiarize themselves with this, and this is, I guess I'd say it's almost like a secret society in the sense that to protect the true understanding, and it's superficially very simple, like love one another. Very simple, right? But I'm not saying that's a Hermetic philosophy, but the laws of the universe are part of the Hermetic philosophy. And they seem, pretty straightforward. As above, so below. Just very simple. They're not, and they can be easily misused unless you have a real understanding. And you don't get a real understanding unless you're slowly introduced to the complexities. And in the past, anyway, I don't know, now, but in the past, these ideas were introduced to apprentices, trainees, initiates, and it was really a secret society because they didn't want ordinary Joe Blows to be running around on the internet talking about the secret, because that's what happened. It could be misused. We're going to attempt to at least get the outline of the basics of the truth of the philosophy. The actual day-to-day workings, more complicated. So there are these few people don't seek popular approval, and they don't seek large numbers of followers. What they do is to protect the truth. They know there are only a few ready in every generation to fully understand. So, good try, right? It's difficult, and you need a guide. And the maxim they have for this is a quote: "Preserve strong meat for men and milk for babies." So I guess today we'll have a little milk. So where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. You hear it when you're ready to hear it. Another quote: "The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding." His followers, Hermes' followers, have been criticized for seclusion and reticence over the ages. They've been, criticized for being secret. But they don't seek to be martyrs, they say. In this book, they say they're secret because they don't seek to be martyrs. They knew it was folly to come forward while, quote, "the heathen raged noisily about them." What better description of January 6th? So, and they also remind us that this persecution has not yet died out. This book, I'm sorry, I should have said this. I don't think I even looked it up. Maybe it's not written. Well, it was printed in 2012. I'm not 100% sure when it was actually put together and written, but it's certainly timely. So what is the Hermetic philosophy? What are we actually talking about here? This is the fundamental occult teaching from Egypt, but developed in Egypt from earlier writings, as we've said. Sometimes this repeats, so bear with me. In Egypt, an aside, I think that may very well be the process of initiation. You get things repeated and they build on the foundation and they repeat because repeating is how you learn. In Egypt, the great mystics resided in the temples. They sent hierophants, high priests, adepts, and masters all around the globe. The story is that Hermes was one of the master of masters. Was he a man? Was he something higher than that? It's lost to time. Hermes Trismegistus was the father of occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy, although actually maybe introducer. I think some of that was known, or at least parts of it were known in by the Arabians, for example. Details of life that were lost to time and sometimes disputed. It's agreed that he lived his last life, because he lived a really long time, in Egypt at a time of the earliest dynasties, long before Moses. So here we go again with this conflicted timeline. Some say Abraham learned from Hermes. The story is that he lived to be 300 years old, but the story is also that he lived over 1,000 years. So as you can see, they're collating the belief systems from the mythologies of a variety of cultures, and best not to get bogged down in, mere facts. That we're looking at philosophy here is what matters. Called the scribe of the gods, he was deified by the Egyptians as Thoth. The Greeks deified him as Hermes, the god of wisdom, the messenger god. Trismegistus means thrice great, the fountain of wisdom. And hermetic now, today, interestingly, is defined as something that is sealed so it cannot escape. In other words, a secret. His name became synonymous with tightly held information. His followers practiced in secrecy. Now, this is really true. The concept of Hermes himself as a demigod, a total god, a human, a prophet, 300 years old, 1,000 years old, that is an argument for the ages. But there really were followers of this philosophy from very far back and spread around, eventually collating all of it. Let's see. His followers practiced in secrecy. Now, this is where I said they're kind of arch. They're a little bit snobby, but there's an intention behind it. One of their quotations is, "Don't cast pearls before swine." That's where that phrase in the Bible comes from. It comes from the followers of Hermes. In other words, if your ears are not open, it's a waste of the wisdom. And rather than toss it out there and let the mob go after you as a martyr, they try to find followers who are open-minded and ready to hear. They were familiar to the Christians, but this comes far before the Bible from the Egyptians. There was a very careful dissemination of their truth in all lands and all religions, and they were warned to not create a creed. This is one of their philosophies. Part of their philosophy is institutional religion, organized religion, doctrine, dogma, a creed. No. In India and Persia, ancient occultism was taken up by priests. Then it was mixed with theology and philosophy gradually, and the philosophy gradually was lost to religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So, as I often say, there's a kernel of truth in most belief systems, but it's been negatively altered. This is the same as what happened in ancient Greek religion, ancient Roman religion, with the Gnostics and the early Christians. Constantine smothered philosophy with a blanket of theology, and therefore Christianity lost its essence, its spirit. Jesus very much talked about Hermetic philosophy. So this philosophy is usually not found in books. They didn't write it down much. As I said, the Emerald Tablet and Hermetica, I can't remember. But those three small sources, difficult to find this information. I'm telling you, I have been hunting. It's hard to find in books. The Kybalion is the early compilation that was never written down until now. And it's a collection of maxims, as I said, and axioms and precepts that won't be understandable to people if they're not ready to hear it. So you may listen to this. 100% of the people watching this today are nodding their heads. I can just feel it. There are people who might, out of curiosity, try to watch this and go, what are they talking? What is she talking about? It has to fall on open ears. And if, for example, you're a fundamentalist Christian and still fully committed to that belief system, then that's where you are. You're not here. It's neither better or worse. It's a location on a journey. It's really, I need to remind myself of that constantly. To have compassion and understanding that we're all on a journey. There are plenty of people who don't need to hear this because they're far, far and away ahead of this. So get over yourself. I'm talking to me. Get over yourself. So the Kybalion was an early compilation, never written down, a collection of maxioms, and not understandable to people not ready for it. The art of Hermetic alchemy is about a material transmutation of elements of one metal into gold. But is it really? No, it's a metaphor. It's really about the mastery of mental forces. Now we're talking about physics, plasma physics. Keep that in mind. Keep thinking about Dolores Cannon, plasma physics, all the things we've read over the past couple of years about near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and paranormal, UFO, all this stuff is in here. That's so interesting. Transmutating one kind of metal to another is done by vibration. We're talking about elevating vibration. It's a symbol, the Philosopher's Stone. You're elevating your stone-like, low-density, earthbound, three-dimensional soul. And you're transmutating it. You're energizing it and turning it into that plasma being of light. The Philosopher's Stone that changed base metal into gold was an allegory relating to Hermetic philosophy. So when the student is ready to receive the truth will come to him or her. That is the law, a natural law. The Hermetic principle of cause and effect in its aspects of the law of attraction will bring lips and ears together. And we're going to talk about these laws. And an important thing to remember about these laws of the universe, these Hermetic philosophical laws, is that they overlap, they intersect, they work together. They also work independently, but they work together. And it sometimes gets a little hard to parse out which one we're talking about. Hard for me because I'm, like I said, a neophyte to this. But it's less important to put a label on it than it is to understand the principles in action. So what is an axiom? An axiom is a statement regarded as accepted, self-evident, and true. 2 + 2 = 4. You need no proof. Proof can be provided, but you don't need proof. It's so obvious. What's a maxim? A maxim, this is my favorite, is a pithy statement, and it expresses the truth from which one can deduce morality. So it takes an axiom, a true fact, can't be argued, and it moralizes on it. So, for example, actions speak louder than words. So that was the first chapter of the book. I'm not even sure I actually wrote that down. Chapter 2 is the 7 Hermetic principles. So we start with the principles of truth. The first one is the principle of mentalism, which is, now they have their own way. The Hermeticists have their own phraseology, which may not necessarily coincide with what you can read on the internet. It may not coincide with The Secret. But this is like the OG laws of the universe. So we're going to focus on this first. We'll bring other stuff in after. So law 1, principle of mentalism. All is the mind. The universe is mental. What did Robert Temple say in the science, new science of heaven? That's why I was so excited about it, because I'd already read this and I was applying it to that, and I could not wait to share that, because what they're discovering in plasma physics about the crystallized information packets in the plasma all over the universe that can carry untold amounts of knowledge. The universe is mental. The all is spirit, unknowable, undefinable, universal, and infinite living mind is the all. So the source, the creator, God, whatever terminology you feel comfortable with, that's what we're talking about. The phenomenal world, the world that we experience, the universe, is a mental creation of the all. So, not in the book, this is me speaking, you could call it the thoughts of God. The universe, the thoughts of God. It exists in the mind of the all. It is subject to the laws of created things, and there are laws. And it explains, therefore, all the mental, psychic phenomena that defy science suddenly become completely explicable if we understand these Hermetic laws. This explains the true nature of energy, plasma physics, power, and matter. Quote, "He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." So Robert Temple, boy, he's way down the road. He really gets it. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. So number 1, and really have to start out there, all is mental. Universe is mental. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. We think of correspondence as writing letters, but there's a little bit more to it. And this is going to sound so familiar. As above, so below. Think of the magician card in tarot. There is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of various planes of being and life. And they showed this in the experiments that they did in the laboratory with plasma physics. They showed it in what they know internally about the human body, and they showed it on a universal, in the cosmos, astronomical sense, astrophysicists. And Dolores Cannon's books talk about this from another direction. And Peter Fenwick's books. I mean, these all come to fruition in these philosophies. Larger universal concepts are shown on our plane in a way that, should we choose, we could understand. It helps us to understand the planes beyond our knowing. And this is a universal law. This is not something that we can debate. It's an important principle to understand and to help us to figure out the unknown. It can help tear aside the veil between the other side. And it helps us to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. The principle of correspondence. What we're seeing is the larger world in microcosm. Principle number 3, the principle of vibration. Once again, physics. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. Everything. Nothing is at rest. Each new scientific discovery verifies this. This was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt and before. Rocks vibrate. Rocks contain energy. Crystals do contain energy. So I, who was something of a skeptic, understand now that given the right set of circumstances, crystals can heal. Not something mainstream. The difference between matter, which is, solid, liquid, gas, plasma, energy, and the mind is a difference of vibration. And spirit also. It's a difference of vibration. They just have varying rates of vibration, which is a law of physics. What turns ice into water? The molecules move faster. The higher the vibration, the higher the position on the scale of evolution. Spirits vibrate at an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that they move so fast that it's practically at rest. They're moving so quickly. And it's like a rapidly moving wheel. If you watch a wheel move really, really, really fast, it seems motionless. You lose that sense of spokes. You lose the sense of hubcap. It seems motionless. It's going so fast. And at the lower end, gross forms of matter vibrate so slowly that they seem completely at rest. They seem, I use the word dead. It's the wrong word, but just sitting like a rock. So between these two poles, moving so high you can barely see it, moving so slowly you can barely see it, there are millions of degrees of vibrations and on all planes. With training, hermetic training, we can control our vibration and the vibration of others. This is where it becomes really interesting. But do you want to? You have to be very careful about what you do with others. Quote, "He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power." We're talking magic, miracles, that kind of thing. We're talking psychic stuff. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles, which is like opposites. The next sentence, everything has opposites. Opposites are identical, but different in degree. Now, there's a concept that I had to really think about. Let's go back to everything is moving. How did they word that? I want to get it absolutely right. The principle of vibration. Let's go back to the principle of vibration. Moving so fast you can barely see it. Moving so slowly you can barely see it. Dual, opposite, but just a difference in degree. They're identical seeming, but different in degree. The extremes meet. All things, all truths are half-truths. And by that they mean there's a duality. Everything is and is not at the same time. And I think it's important to toss in here that doesn't mean that there is only moral relativism. I think it's important to know that underlying all of this, how you treat others is the foundation. So, for example, hot and cold. Where does heat end and cold start? That's a little bit of a mind bender, isn't it? So there are degrees of hot and cold, and they are degrees of the same thing, just a matter of vibration. And other examples would be light and darkness. When is it all dark and absolutely no light, or all light and absolutely no dark? Look at all the degrees in between, twilight, dawn, large and small. Who's to say? That's relative, right? Hard and soft, love and hate. They say that love and hate on a continuum, you get love, kind of love, falling in love. They must have been watching The Bachelor. falling for you. Then you fall in love, and then you kind of love. Then you get to like, and then dislike, annoying, and then hate. It's a sort of a spectrum. They're different vibrations of the same thing. And we can change. This is the really important part of all of this, is that we can change one to the other by changing the vibrations in ourselves and in others. You could bring people around in an argument, and you don't do it by being hostile. You bring them around by persuasion. So good versus evil, that could be changed. The art of polarization, it's actually a process that's called a phase of mental alchemy. This is sort of, I guess, magic. And we're not talking magic pulling rabbits out of hats here. We're talking an understanding of the principles of the universe that's so advanced that you can use them. Now, you can use them in a positive way, or you can use them in a negative way. It kind of depends on the vibration. Okay, principle number 5, the principle of rhythm. And apparently I thought this was important to read aloud. Yeah. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. The things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. In everything is in motion. Everything vibrates. Remember, I said these principles overlap. Everything is in motion to and fro in the sense of like a pendulum. And it's a tide-like ebb and flow, action and reaction. What's the law of physics? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. They already knew that. Advance and retreat, rise and sink. And this all agrees with the principle of polarity. In the rise and fall of nation, it says this law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds. Now, we could apply this understanding, this is me talking, we could apply this understanding to politics, to current events. Just listen to this. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally, in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. No kidding. Okay, where am I? And this principle can be affected by the mental law of neutralization. Nothing can annul the principle, but you can escape from its effects with mastery, which we're going to talk about more later. And they use it instead of being used by it. And I think that's the big, the trick of becoming a master hermeticist, teacher, a hierophant of these principles, is when you understand them well enough to use them positively and not be a victim of them, use them in a positive way. A master can polarize himself to neutralize the rhythm of the pendulum, and many do this unconsciously. A master does it consciously through a state of poise. It's like a calm. Number 6, the principle of cause and effect, which will sound familiar. They believe, quote, chance is but a name for a law not recognized. I thought that was great. We think things are happening out of control. Oh my God. Or no, it's just not. It's an immature, undeveloped understanding or lack of understanding of the principles of the universe. There are many planes of causation, but nobody escapes the principle of cause and effect. Nothing merely happens. Nothing happens by chance. There are no coincidences. Most people are carried along and they feel the effect. Masters learn to be the cause. And then okay, I'll read the thing to you, and then I'll tell you what I wrote. I sometimes editorialize in the margins. Most are governed by the wills of those stronger than themselves, like pawns on a chessboard. And in the margin I wrote, MAGA and fascists. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. You can learn to be a mover and a player in the game of life and not just be moved. And there are people always ask, how do bad, evil people prevail so often? They know this and they apply this. Good people don't apply it enough. Principle number 7, the principle of gender. Often talked about, never understood. Everything has masculine and feminine. Now we're talking duality, polarity, the opposites. And this works ever in the direction of generation, in regeneration and creation. Both elements are in all. Think about what we learned about plasma, electrons and protons working together to form matter through the clouds of dust, they're ions, masculine and feminine. And interestingly, because I think I know just from being in science classes from years ago, I tend to think of male as negative and female as positive. And that's not how they look at it, but they say that the male is in the female and the female is in the male. And they warn in this book that there may be base revivals of degraded teachings of this, perversions of nature's principles. It's very important to really understand this properly. Go to the correct sources. But they remind us that to the pure, all things are pure, and to the base, all things are base. And I just love that word, because what do they call themselves in MAGA? The base. Chapter 3, mental transmutation. Hermeticists were the original alchemists, the original astrologers, and the original psychologists. Over time, these philosophies, because philosophy was considered a science and was taught that way by the ancients, and over time astrology kind of evolved into astronomy, alchemy became chemistry, and mystic psychology became modern psychology, or The Secret. You can tell I don't like that book. But the ancients knew what moderns believe, but they understood it better. They had a better grasp of the clarity of it. For example, we think we've discovered all this stuff, like fresh, out of nowhere. But for example, the pyramid design shows a knowledge of astronomy, geometry, physics. Ancient ideas of physics are today verified, which I won't belabor. We've talked about that. They had a grasp of psychology, and especially areas that are often ignored today, like psychic science, that today's psychologists admit there must be something to it. They just don't have a grasp of what that something might be. Ancients did. They possessed the knowledge. Transcendental astronomy is astrology. Transcendental chemistry is alchemy, and transcendental psychology is mystic psychology. Today's scientists and scholars only have the outer knowledge, not the transcendental. Ancients had the outer knowledge and the inner knowledge. One of the types of knowledge the Hermeticists had was mental transmutation. Transmutation is usually referring to the idea of changing, as I said earlier, base metals into gold. So like, not valuable ore into gold. And this is usually to change let me rephrase that. What it really referred to, what the Hermeticists really meant by this, the early alchemists really meant by this is the word alchemy doesn't really mean, well, it does and it doesn't, but it doesn't really mean the process of changing metals from not valuable to invaluable. What it really means is raising vibrations and creating a higher plane. It became chemistry. And what they taught was to change one substance to another, but it was a way of couching their philosophy in something a little safer to talk about. Mental transmutation refers to the art of changing and transforming mental states, mental forms and conditions into others. It's the art of mental chemistry. They say it so much better than I tried to. It's a form of mystic psychology. It's a lot about what some of the experiences that Dolores Cannon's subjects talked about. And there's a huge amount of debate that I've gotten from people about her and her work, and it's really interesting to me. But what I like to do is to remove the personalities and remove prejudices and try to keep an open mind about the concepts. And these concepts about higher planes of vibration, well, they've been confirmed by plasma physics, so it's really nothing about belief. It's about understanding facts. So remember that the first Hermetic principle is the principle of mentalism. The all is the mind, the universe is mental. This is the underlying reality of the universe. The universe is mind, and it exists in the mind of all, and we are part of the all, so ergo. Therefore, mental transmutation would be changing the conditions of the universe along the lines of matter, force, and mind. Therefore, mental transmutation is what the ancients called magic. And therefore, a master is able to control material and mental conditions by applying and manipulating the principles, the laws of the universe. But only advanced mental alchemists actually can control the elements of nature. They can make it rain. They can make the lightning come. They can create. Remember the story in the Bible? Was it Moses and his staff turned to a snake? Those sorts of things. And in parentheses, I anticipate what I wrote earlier. It's been weeks and weeks since I've read this, but it's funny how logically I just sort of remember, in parentheses, for example, stopping and creating storms and earthquakes and other physical phenomena, real magicians, kind of like Merlin, right? So such men did and do exist. They don't make themselves public. They don't exhibit their powers, the amazing Kruskin, They seek seclusion as they work their way along the path of attainment. That's what it's all about, spiritual attainment. Their power is mental and operates under the principle of mentalism. Let's see how we're doing here for time. Okay. All students can develop this to some degree, and it's called psychic phenomena. It's the mental influence. These students work along mental planes, and they transmute mental conditions and states according to the formulae that agree with the principles of the universe. The various treatments, affirmations, denials, etc. of schools of mental science are really formula to make things happen. They may seem imperfect and unscientific, but most modern practitioners are ignorant compared to the ancient masters. We're trying to replicate what was known and has been lost to all but the very enlightened. We have a lack of fundamental knowledge. With some understanding of the laws and principles of mental states, they can be controlled, they can be transmuted. And usually this happens unconsciously, but if people are more informed, they can make it happen consciously. It depends in part on an earnest desire and a will, and the treatment of the person deserving the change or desiring the change. You can use this for good or evil because of the principle of polarity. As I said, a lot of really awful people make it happen. They make their stuff happen. And they don't even know. Like they said, it's unconscious. They don't even know what they're doing is manipulating the laws, the principles of the universe. But in essence, that's what they're doing, and that's why they're successful. And they're just more aggressive about it or more single-minded about it, unfortunately. Okay, I am going to stop here. This is a perfect place to stop and start the next video. I hope you're enjoying this. It's a little different from what I usually do. I think it ties a lot of things together, as I said. And it's a lot to think about. And this book, I recommend this book as a resource. I'll show you a page, how it's written. It gets really, really wordy in some places. And then there will be one part that's so important that Anyway, stop here. Start video number 2 next. I'll be back. Slung the foil.